chapter 21 of Sutta Discovery 42 or SD 42.21. Sakkaya Sutta, the discourse on self-identity, S 22.105. Always note the sutta title and then the number, that is 22.105. So either you remember the sutta by the name or by the number, then you can always look back, refer back to the sutta whenever you like. Or you can also remember the SD number 42.21 to get the translation and the notes. In fact, these translations in the Sutta Discovery series have become very fully annotated. Someone even said it's the most well annotated translation series we have. But that's the whole idea of this translation series, to provide as much notes as possible for a beginner, and also for scholars, students who are doing serious study of all these suttas, and also to give the teachings of the teachers who are still alive today, the meditators and so on. So we try to look at the sutta from different angles as completely as possible. So after 12 years of translating this, there's a sort of commentarial tradition that's grown around these suttas, and they're becoming more and more interesting. After 12 years, you begin to see how the various suttas are interconnected. Many of the teachings appear to repeat themselves, but these are like variations on the same theme, and those variations are very beautiful. They're not just variations, they're not just repetitions, but even in music, repetitions can be very beautiful, can be very peaceful, very uplifting. So there's always a reason why certain passages in the suttas would repeat themselves, or would have these variations on just their line or a word changes. Because remember, whenever we look at the suttas, they are meditative texts. These texts are meant for meditation, for inner peace. Sometimes even reading the suttas themselves can bring us peace. I know at least there's one person or one monk who does justice, and he calls it Sutta Puja, something like Sutta Puja. In other words, you go through the suttas completely as it is, without any shortcuts, without any peyalas. In other words, no etc. Because most of us do not know what the etc's are anyway. So we've got to look at the sutras very completely, very much like a computer program. I mean, if you just say, if you miss out even a word or a line in a computer program, you find it won't work. So very interestingly, if you're a programmer, you look at the suttas and you know Pali, and you begin to notice there is a system in all the repetitions, in all the variations, the concatenations, the nested programming and so on. So there are many variations in the suttas, so that it is handed down for so long, for 2,500 years, and more importantly, when you listen to them peacefully, systematically, with a meditative mind, you find they help you to go into this peaceful state, learning to let go of the words, let go of the world, be at peace with yourself. That's the purpose of the suttas. They're not there to entertain us. It's not like reading a novel. However, when you study suttas, you can approach it as literature also, because there are literary devices, and if you know literature, you understand the nature of the teachings even better than those who do not. There's a lot we can talk about suttas from a literary point of view. For example, from the approach of aesthetics even. The suttas are beautiful in themselves because they uplift us with the sense of self-knowledge, a kind of self-liberation, because we begin to understand ourselves. So today, that is the kind of sutta we're dealing with. The title is quite short, Sakkaya Sutta. Sakkaya, kaya means body. Sak here has to do with something like self. So it's a kind of, the teaching here is talking about one of the key ideas or roots that hold us back in this world, that prevent us from awakening. That is Sakkaya, self-identity. We tend to identify with something, inverted commas, something in our being. What is our being? From this sutra you can see the other five aggregates. The five aggregates, in other words, are what we really are. We have mind, that is form. Mind are the four, what do you call this, non-form aggregates: feeling, perception, information, consciousness, and form is the body. So when you expand this idea of mind and body, you have the five aggregates. So let us just go into this first. It's an embedded sutta. This is a short sutta related to the actual sutta 22.1, S22.105. So here we have S38.15. This is another sutta, similar title, Sakaya Panha Sutta. Sakaya, self-identity, Panha means question. Sutta, discourse, the discourse on the self-identity question. What is self-identity? Okay, this is a kind of subheading I put in, so it's easier for the reader. Self-identity is self-identity, so it is said, Avuso Sariputta. What now? Avuso Sariputta is self-identity. And we're not told who the questioner is. It's obviously one of the manas. And here the teacher is Sariputta. Sometimes the questioner may be another elder, so it's not a new monk. So these monks in Buddha's time live very happy lives. They have nothing else to do except do the Dharma, if you like. So occasionally they will meet, and then they will have what we today call a radio talk show. So a younger monk, usually, sometimes a senior monk, a junior monk would ask a senior monk, they're both arahats by the way. Ananda might ask Sariputta, or Akotita will ask Sariputta, and so on. So what is this or what is that? And Sariputta will answer. Sometimes Sariputta himself will ask questions of another arahat monk. So we don't really know who this questioner is, and it doesn't really matter, because this method of question and answer is a very common method in the ancient times. It's called the Sanghayana method, the council method. So here we have this kind of, today we might call a catechetical method, that is of questioning and answering. It's a very popular way of teaching. So what is self-identity? What now Avuso is self-identity? Then Sariputta answers, these five aggregates of clinging, Avuso simply means friend, address between equals, are spoken of by the Blessed One to be self-identity. Notice here that Sariputta doesn't say, I say so, or this is my definition. He always refers back to the Buddha. Okay? So the five aggregates of clinging are spoken of by the Buddha to be self-identity, namely the aggregate of clinging that is form, the aggregate of clinging that is feeling, the aggregate of clinging that is perception, the aggregate of clinging that is formations, the aggregate of clinging that is consciousness. These are also the five aggregates of clinging that are spoken of by the Blessed One to be self-identity. Now notice there's not much of a commentary here, it's just a kind of a statement. Well, these are what people identify with. So this is where occasions like this, a living teacher would try to interpret them, teach them for the benefit of others. In other words, the suttas preserve a kind of a core teaching. It's like some ancient masters in music will write some beautiful pieces with some notes. Then in the future, if you're a musician, then you kind of try to make variations from this piece. So, in a sense, whenever you talk about suttas, you don't really talk new things. You are playing a variation on a theme. You try to replay this wonderful classic that has been taught to us by a master musician called the Buddha. And depending on the environment, the audience, and of course the understanding, the skill of the teacher, you have this teaching before you. And then this teaching is to make us feel joyful, to uplift us, to calm us down, and then we settle into meditation. And this is the purpose of the Sutta Discovery series, to translate all the suttas. So here, the five aggregates are said to be self-identity, because we tend to identify with one or other of this form, some people identify with their body. Feeling, some people say, oh, my feelings, you're hurting my feelings. We use the word I, me, mine. That's how we identify with things. Or we identify with perception, our memories, how we recognize things. Or with formations, here's the karmic aspect, if you like, how we react to things in a karmic way, through great head delusion especially. And of course our consciousness on a very basic level, how we see things, hear things, smell, taste, touch, think. Okay, so these are the 5 aggregates. Now notice here, each of the aggregate is said to be the aggregate of clinging, upadana. So form in Pali is said to be rupupadana khandan. It's because there are 2 kinds. It's because there are 2 kinds of khandas or aggregates. You have this aggregates of clinging. These are our aggregates, the unawakened beings. The arahats also have aggregates. You see them, you can touch them. They are as human as you are, but of course their minds are different. So they simply have aggregates, the 5 aggregates, but it's not aggregates of clinging because they don't cling to them. These aggregates do not generate new karma. Okay. And what's very interesting is there's one particular aggregate called sankhara, formations. It is always plural, sankhara, in the case of the unawakened. But in the case of the arahats, they're usually in the singular, sankhara, because the arahat does not have what's called papancha. Papancha is thought explosion, if you like. This mental proliferation. For many of us, one thought comes to mind, then we kind of get lost in the thoughts. Many other things start coming in. One thought attracts many other thoughts. That's called papancha. Pancha means 5. Papancha is like, we call it a reduplicative in Pali. It kind of strengthens the word 5, 5, 5. And also from the 5 senses, the mind creates more ideas, multiply exponentially. Okay, so we burst into this maelstrom of thoughts, and sometimes, usually, in fact, we can't handle so many thoughts. Whereas in the case of the arahats, it's just one thing at a time. It's very peaceful, very clear, like a clear mirror. So the aggregates are not those like ours, not clinging aggregates. Upadana is an ancient Pali word which also means fuel. So these aggregates fuel us, keep us going in this samsara, keep us wanting to continue, wanting to live on in this life, and repeating same old mistakes. So that's called suffering. This is the meaning of clinging. Right? Okay, so this is the first definition. Okay. Then the section 4.1. But also, is there a way, is there a path for the fully knowing of this self-identity? Sarvabhuta answers, yeah, there is also a way, there is a path for the fully knowing of this self-identity. But what also is that way, the path for the fully knowing of this self-identity? It is this very noble, eightfold path: right view, right thought, or right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This also is the way, the path for the fully knowing of this self-identity. So in other words, it's the way up. Okay? So here we have the essence of Buddhism. The kind of this teaching expands on the Buddha's short statement, famous statement to Anuradha, where he says, only one thing do I teach: suffering and the ending of suffering. So it's like the two truths, if you like. Of course, here in the case of suffering, when you expand into the pattern of the Four Noble Truths, you have suffering, the definition, and then the arising of suffering. Then the ending of suffering, you have nirvana, and then the Eightfold Path. So here, the first part is like the statement of the truth, the first two truths, and then the second part is, of course, the ending of suffering. Then the questioner closes with the sadhukara, saying sadhu is auspicious, also is the way, auspicious is the path for the fully knowing of this self-identity, and it is sufficient also for diligence. There you are, at the end of the sutta, it closes the word diligence, apamada. Apamada is the opposite of pamada. Pamada, heedlessness, to be lacking in energy, not making an effort in practice, in mindfulness. So diligence here means the three trainings. We are diligent in cultivating body and speech, in preparing body and speech in such a way that we are at peace with ourselves, that this body and speech become the foundation for mental cultivation, which is a second training, mental cultivation, right? And then this bodily development, or what is called cultivation of moral virtue, plus mental cultivation, they prepare us for the cultivation of wisdom. Here, wisdom meaning seeing things directly, seeing directly into the true nature of things, communicating openly with people because we understand better how we feel, how other people feel, and accepting the reality that's going on around us so that we don't pretend to accept what is not there. In other words, whatever goes on around us, we are like this eye of the storm. We're at peace with ourselves wherever we go. And wherever we go, people also can feel that peace. And this is what the Buddha has handed us, our legacy for all these 2,500 years. This ability to generate this wonderful peace wherever we are, right here, right now. So diligence is something that refers to this desire, this ability to work with this inner peace whenever we need to, whenever others need to. We try to help them, teach them how to do this. So this is the essence of the teaching on this Sakayapana Sutta. Now, self-identity arises, of course, through ignorance. Ignorance here refers to not understanding the Four Noble Truths. That means, number one, we do not understand the nature of suffering. We do not see suffering as suffering. We think that something that brings suffering is actually pleasurable. We don't realize that pleasure and pain actually, they go together. You can't have one without the other. One is the absence of the other. That's one way of looking at it. And if you understand this, you say, okay, I begin to see that pleasure and pain actually go together. Once the pleasure is gone, pain will come. I accept this. Then you begin to understand the First Noble Truth. And this doesn't mean you stop enjoying life, not at all. The meaning is that, if you're talking as a layman, that is, you enjoy whatever sensual pleasures you can within the purview of the 5 precepts. And the precepts means you know when to stop. And you understand that all these wonderful feelings are impermanent. It's just like you look at a piece of music, you listen carefully to this piece of music, not just casually listening, but if you meditate on this, the music, you begin to notice there are silence, there are moments of silence between the notes, and it is these moments of silence that create the beauty. If there was no silence, there would be no music. So silence plus variations in sounds, and you begin to experience this joy through sounds. What you're experiencing is impermanence at its most beautiful. There is this change going on all the time. So too with words, poetry and so on. So you begin to see here that when we talk about meditation, we talk about the Dharma, you can't really separate aesthetics from it. We're talking about experience of joy and beauty when you study the Dharma, when you look at the suttas. Of course, these are words, but when you go through the words, beyond the words, you see the experience of this mind that was enlightened 2,500 years ago, the Buddha, and you begin to see the joy and peace within the mind, and you begin to experience it in your own, with whatever you have. I mean, if you do not have those things, how are you going to experience them? So if you love music, you begin to see it like the most beautiful, the greatest beauty that music can give. If you're a poet, you're inspired to write beautiful poetry. If you're an artist, you begin to see colors and shapes and shades, and you see beauty in vision, and so on. So, in other words, as a layperson, or even as a monastic, you see this beauty in the Dharma, and of course, as a layman, you're more free to express this joy. As a monk, of course, you give good teachings, good talks, and there are artist monks and so on, who sometimes those who paint temple walls with beautiful pictures. But of course, that was not the intention of the Buddha. Many of these monks, they have great talents, but they're supposed to be meditating. So you find that those early arahats, many of them were very talented people, but when they became monks, they became great teachers. In other words, they took a different role. They took the role of expressing beauty through their personal conduct and through speech, in other words, to communicate with others, the Dharma which the Buddha awakened to. So self-identity arose through ignorance, right? And because of ignorance, in other words, not knowing what comes next, it's like, imagine, we don't have to be blind, but you're in a totally dark room. You just don't know where the switch is, so you have to wander around, fumble around, and you kind of stumble over things. And so you have to move very carefully, bit by bit, inch by inch. And one of the first things you need to do in a dark room, maybe find a wall, and follow the wall, and maybe go near a door, and probably there's a switch there, and turn on the switch. So when we meditate, we're doing just that. We're trying to find this wall in this dark room, so we can just guide the mind along the wall, and then find that switch, right? And so when you are at peace, your mind is focused, it's like you find that switch, and then there's this bright lights appearing in your mind, for example. So this ignorance, in other words, prevents us from seeing true reality, and it makes us wander all over the place. So imagine someone who is panicking, so running all over the place in the dark, and he's going to hurt himself, he's going to hurt others. So from this craving, you have this, from this ignorance, you have craving, and craving means it's a very self-centered thing. You're only caring about yourself, and you're running around amok in this dark room and knocking things down, knocking people down, hurting yourself and hurting others. So it's not very helpful. So ignorance and craving, they go together. They kind of two very primordial things we have to deal with. That is why the suttas repeat themselves, because these are the basic truths we need to know. Sometimes we just hear it, but it doesn't really, we don't really get the message. And sometimes you might know something for a whole lifetime. It might take the last few years of your life to really say, oh yes, now I get it. I've been studying Buddhism for the last 40 over years. You find that even now, as I look at some of the simple terms or simple sentences in the suttas, you begin to see a new and deeper and broader meaning in them. So that's how we build up our understanding of the Dharma. Never underestimate the depth of a simple sentence in the suttas. Understanding them is a foundation and preparation for deeper understanding in due course. So we build up our understanding to the suttas. Now we come to the sutta itself, the main sutta, the discourse of self-identity, on page 115. It's S22.105. S is Samyutta. Okay, here we know these teachings given by the Buddha because it starts off with originating at Savatthi, Savatthi Nidana, something like a story at Savatthi. Now pictures I will teach you. Self-identity, the arising of self-identity, the ending of self-identity, and the way to the ending of self-identity. listen. So this is a typical approach with the Buddha. He will say, I'm going to tell you something, get ready. Okay? So you can see here that the pattern used is that of the Four Noble Truths. So the Buddha using self-identity and using the model of the Four Noble Truths. First there is self-identity, then the arising of self-identity, the ending of self-identity, and then the way to the ending of self-identity. So here the identity equals suffering. Or a more specific aspect of self-identity, if you like. So here we see the Four Noble Truths, in other words, as a model for problem solving. In fact, when we talk about Buddhist counseling, Buddhist psychotherapy, meditation therapy, we use this model, the Four Noble Truths. And you have a circle, and you have like this peace diagram with a vertical line, then kind of a V-shape like that. So these are four quadrants of the counseling procedure, if you like. So the first quadrant is you identify the problem, right? That's the first noble truth. Then in the second quadrant, you kind of talk about, or you try to work on the arising. Of course, in counseling, maybe you might use the word causes of the problem. What's interesting in the Four Noble Truths is that the word cause is not used, Hetupachaya is not used. It simply says samudaya, arising, sang, udaya. Sang or sang here is like in English or Latin con, meaning there is a convergence of conditions. Even the word conditions got con in front, meaning coming together. Udaya, arising. So here we're talking about conditions. When the conditions are there, this situation arises. Now we don't say the conditions cause the suffering to arise. We only say the suffering arises when these conditions are present. I mean, it's just like you are waiting for a bus, you know. And when you wait for a bus, you don't say, my waiting for the bus causes the bus to come. It's not right. You know. You are there because you are creating this condition so that you can meet this bus. This bus is going to come there, so these conditions are right. Then the bus comes, you get off the bus. So you can say you're standing at the bus stop, it causes the bus to come. That's from logic, you see. At best you can say there's a correlation, there's a difference between cause and correlation in philosophy. Yeah? So here, it's very important to understand this nature of conditionality in Buddhism, because this is the essence at the root of problem solving. We tend to blame people, blame others. Why? Again, because of self-identity. I, me, mine, and you, serving other, right? So we try to find this problem, cause of the problem, if you like, outside of ourselves. But the real situation is this problem is arising within us and it needs to be solved there. So this is another important idea. In other words, these conditions arise from the way we look at things. It's just like when you meditate, you know, you create this happy, peaceful conditions within you. You change within you. The world outside doesn't change. It just goes on as it is. It changes in its own way, but we say it doesn't change, meaning it's the way it is. But we change ourselves. You can't change the world. We have tried since civilization started, you know. But when you try too hard, the environment becomes so bad it won't support life, or it might be inconducive to life. So we have to change ourselves, and we cannot change the environment too much. That's not what it's meant to be. So same thing with the Dharma. We don't change the Dharma. That's what sometimes people do. People with power change things. People with lots of craving try to change Buddhism. They say, oh, we need to modernize Buddhism, to adapt to all times. Maybe the way we teach Buddhism can be kind of suitable to the audience, yes, the language changes and so on. But the Dharma, you don't change the Dharma, right? You use the Dharma to change yourself. So it's very important to understand where do we change things, what do we change? We don't change the Dharma, we change ourselves. We use the Dharma like a mirror to look at and then examine ourselves and work with ourselves, in other words. So you see the Buddha giving all this serenity using the mode of the form of the truth, problem-solving methods. Yeah? So once you identify the conditions from which problems arise, then you can say, okay, so obviously we have to remove these conditions, right? So you find in counseling, this is what we do. We say, okay, the counselee recognizes the conditions that brings about this unhappy state. So the next thing is to work on this, right? And the last one is actually kind of doing it, right? Or the contract, I would say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It's like you tell yourself, like taking a kind of a vow, if you like, kind of a separation, telling yourself this is what I want to do, an aspiration, in other words. So that's the last part, the Eightfold Path, right? Sometimes number 3 and 4 of the Four Noble Truths are switched around. You have the path first, and then Nirvana. Okay, that also makes sense. It's like you move along the path and you reach the goal. Okay, I suspect this formula actually is the more ancient one. You have suffering, statement of suffering, the arising of suffering, then the path, and then Nirvana. It's more like a natural sequence of the path. However, in practice, if you are really dealing with a problem, you will talk to your counselor and you will say, okay, what's the problem? Let us examine, let us work to discover what issue you want to identify as the main one. And then number 2, what are the conditions bringing this problem about? And number 3, we would say, okay, imagine you've solved this problem. Can you see it? All right, so that's Nirvana, number 3. Right? And then number 4, let's get down to working on it. Right? So this is a more practical kind of approach, if you like. So this Four Noble Truth approach has become well known until today, right? So but occasionally, you very rarely you see this the old version of the Four Noble Truth where Nirvana is number 4. Okay, number 3 is the path. Right. So let's go on a bit more. So the rest of the sutta will be following the model of the Four Noble Truths. So section 4, the Buddha says, and what bhikshus is self-identity? It should be said, the 5 aggregates of clinging. Right, there you are. So you find this is what is given more briefly in the previous sutta, the Sakaya Sutta. And what bhikshus are the 5? They are the aggregates of clinging, that is form, the aggregate of clinging, that is feeling, the aggregate of clinging, that is perception, the aggregate of clinging, that is formations, the aggregate of clinging, that is consciousness. This bhikshus is suffering, right? So there you are, you have the 5 aggregates. Again, form is suffering. Why do we say form is suffering? It's the body. The body is impermanent. We feel pain. It's very obvious. Physical pain. The rest are all, if you like, you can call them psychological pain, if you like, or even spiritual pain. Then feelings is suffering because they change. Even pleasurable feelings is suffering. It's rather strange, right? It's amazing that Buddha actually said that. That itself is an amazing statement. I mean, no one would say pleasure is suffering. It's like saying pleasure is pain. But the point is, because we're oriented to something pleasurable, then when it's gone, we don't like it. That's the problem. And yet, you see the monks, the nuns, the early monastics living in beautiful places, countryside. It's a beautiful place. Even today, people love going to retreat centers. For example, I only spent a short time, a few days in Jhana Grove. But the space there, the trees and the bush, I never left my mind. So whenever I close my eyes and meditate, they come back. This spaciousness is always there. The peace of the spaciousness, the silence of the spaciousness is amazing. One of the beautiful memories I had of Jhana Grove is at night, because in the Malaysian jungles you hear crickets. I mean, not crickets, these cicadas. These sharp sounds. You don't hear them there at night. It's so peaceful. It's so peaceful that some Singaporeans are used to it. They thought going there is a wonderful for a retreat. At the first night it's so quiet, and the next morning is able to go home. So that peace is so present. You can easily just get into a peaceful state. All right, so that's feeling. And then you have perception. Again, why is perception suffering? We remember things in the past, and we feel guilty, we feel sad, we feel trouble. We recognize some of these things, and then we can connect with them, we project them to the present. It's perception. Informations are even worse, because informations, you begin to get caught up with the perceptions, the memories that come back, and you begin to get attached to them, or you get upset with them, or you want more of them. Right? In other words, greed, hate, delusion, the three karmic roots begin to take over our lives, and that creates new karma, and we get caught up with even more karma that way. So that's why it is suffering. We keep on suffering, in other words. And karma is not, we should not think of karma just as a kind of behaviorist kind of reward punishment. That's the traditional way of talking, which can be helpful sometimes, but it's not totally correct. The reality is you become your karma. That karma overwhelms you. I mean, if you act, if you're not interested in learning, you're just are quite happy with getting food, clothing, pleasure, and just living a life, a cyclic life, and that's all you do, then it's like an animal life. So we may have a human body, but the mind, if you're an addict, it'll be a preta mind. If you're caught up with gambling, it's a preta mind, an addictive mind. And if you are by nature, if you regularly are violent, then you have an asura mind. So we have a human body, but the mind is not human, it's subhuman. So imagine this, what happens here? You have this body going on in this life, and then the lifespan of the body ends, you die, but this mind continues with what it is. So if it is an asura mind, you go on to become an asura. But in this life itself, we're already in those subhuman states if we're not careful. So we have to be extra careful with how we deal with formations, in other words. Consciousness is really tricky because this is always there, so to speak, when you're awake, the five senses. And somehow all these five senses don't work exactly the way we want them, so there's always something missing. We're always looking for something more, and so on. So consciousness itself is a bit fundamental, but at the same time very difficult to pin down. It might stay all the time. And that's all we can rely on. And if we're not mindful, these consciousnesses do not work well for us. So in that sense, consciousness, or the consciousnesses, are suffering. The consciousnesses, in other words, why plural is because there are six of them, right? Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. Right, then in the next part, the Buddha talks about the arising of self-identity, section 6. And what bhikshus is the arising of self-identity? It is this craving that leads to renewed existence or rebirth, accompanied by pleasure and lust, seeking pleasure here and there, that is to say, the craving for sense pleasures, the craving for existence, the craving for non-existence, or for extinction. This bhikshu is called self-identity. The arising of self-identity. So here we see the second noble truth, craving, in other words, right? So through self-identity, I want this, I want that, right? Something pleasurable, you see something nice, I want this, not knowing when to stop. Like hear something nice, I want that, and so on. But we get caught up with this one thing, not knowing when to stop, in other words. Craving for existence. This refers more to like meditators who go to deep meditation, they don't really know the Dharma, and they say, wow, this level of meditation is really great, I want this. Or some people who talk of meditation in terms of purely just great experiences of power, of rebirth. You get caught up with this instead of letting go of existence, attaining nirvana. Now, the third one, craving for non-existence, is a kind of a materialist response, if you like. Because some people may feel, say, oh, okay, life is suffering, then I do not want to live. I'll destroy my life, and that's the end of it. So they have this idea that the self or the soul and the body are the same. So when the body dies, the self, the soul also dies. So of course there are lots of moral problems with this kind of idea. For example, the materialist will say, okay, you have only one life, so enjoy all that you can. And well, if you have to break the rules, break them, as long as you don't get caught, because when you die, that's it, that's the end. But according to Buddhism, it's not the end. There's always a new beginning. Okay? Of course, there's a big problem here. So we can't prove these things. In fact, there are some Buddhists who say, they can't accept karma and rebirth because they say you can't prove how karma works, you can't prove how whether rebirth works or not. But I think we should not be so problematic about that. We have two choices. Either you talk about God or you talk about karma and rebirth. If you choose the God idea to explain suffering in the world and to explain goodness in the world, it's problematic because there's so many other difficulties with the God idea. Who's God? What kind of God? And moreover, God is just an idea of externalizes our responsibility to an external agency. Whereas if you talk about karma, you talk about rebirth, you're internalizing all these things. You're taking responsibility of your actions. So in that sense, karma works better. And of course, rebirth has to explain many things which otherwise are inexplicable in our lives, like deja vu experiences and child prodigies, things like that. And we can talk a lot about rebirth, of course. So what I'm saying is, although it is difficult for us to prove karma and rebirth, they are definitely very helpful provisional ideas, working ideas in terms of our being. That's good enough for me anyway. After all views, if we are not awakened yet, are provisional views. They are like rungs in this ladder of personal development. You step on one view and then you understand it, and when you understand that, it helps you. One more rung comes up, you step on that and you go up, and when you go up, you let go of the bottom rung. It's a very famous analogy which Ludwig Wittgenstein used. He's one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century. It's like, human knowledge is like a ladder. You go on, you step on the ladder, and when you reach the top, you don't need the ladder anymore. This is also reminiscent to Buddha's teaching on the parable of the raft. All ideas are provisional. So that's the second noble truth. And the third noble truth, right? Section 8. In what pictures the ending of self-identity? It is the utter fading away, an ending of that very craving, giving it up, letting it go, being free from it, being detached from it. This picture is called the ending of self-identity. So when self-identity ends, suffering ends. Utter fading away of craving here means not looking outward all the time, comparing yourself with others. Craving arises in that way. We feel a sense of lack, a false sense of lack. Why? Because we compare ourselves with others. Oh, others have this, have that, and I want to have this too. In other words, you look at things in terms of having rather than of being. You can't have peace. You are or you're not peaceful, right? So we have to cultivate peacefulness. There's another way of looking at it. So here, in other words, when we let go of this I, we also let go of the you. And we begin to understand, in a sense, feel also how others feel. On a more social level, we can say that the so-called more primitive societies or more traditional societies, you find your sense of self is much less than the modern individualism. A compound atmosphere, in other words, is where people are aware of each other and they know everyone. Everyone knows everyone else. It's like as if you have one mind. So in such an environment, such situation, you find people are not likely to break the rules because people will know who break the rules, and you really feel out of place. You feel lost if you're caught in that kind of situation. And when you have something, you share with others. Right? So the sense of selflessness, you can see this idea, very common in the traditional olden societies. Whereas this idea of individualism is quite a modern idea when in a sense, when civilization has become more so advanced that each person can afford to be an island unto himself, so to speak. Whereas in meditation, when we talk about an island, we're talking about when you are meditating, you have to let go of the world. In that sense, you're an island. But this island is a mountain which is separated by this flood of craving and ignorance and of existence and views. There are other mountains far away. And this mountain, this island of a mountain that is the meditator, is a safe spot from the floods where we sit in peace. But once you attain awakening, it is said that all these floods, the four floods, are gone. That's when you begin to see mountains everywhere. Right? So, in other words, you're on a wine island. So it's different when the Buddha and the Buddhists say, be an island unto yourself, be a refuge unto yourself. It means when you meditate, you have to deal with your own problems. It doesn't mean you should not care about other people. The Buddha cared greatly about other people. His teaching is still with us to this day. Right, then the fourth truth is the ending of self-identity, section 10. And what bhikshus is the way leading to the ending of self-identity. It is this very noble Eightfold Path, that is to say, right view, right thought. Okay, notice right view comes first, because without right view, all the other seven will not be right. In other words, right thought also has got right view, right speech is also right view, right action is based on right view, right livelihood is based on right view, right effort is based on right view, right mindfulness is based on right view, right concentration is based on right view. That's why it comes first. Number one and number two constitute or comprise what is called wisdom training. Then right speech, right action, right livelihood comprise this the second training. The first precept, the first training, yeah? Moral virtue. Okay, and then 6, 7, 8, it is right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration is the second training, that is training of the mind, which brings to the 1 and 2, wisdom training, right view, right thought. But in the Eightfold Path, right view comes first, because right view underlies all the other 7 limbs or 7 factors. But in practice, we begin with moral training, 3, 4, 5. So this picture is called the way leading to the ending of self-identity. So here you have to walk the path. So we see the Buddha's teaching the Dharma as a path. A path, that means you have to make your own journey on it. You have to travel this path, you have to walk this path, and it's a gradual path. You have to make an effort. It's okay to walk slowly on the path. It's okay to sometimes even step back a bit, but even to stop, but not too long. You've got to keep on moving, because when night falls, you won't be very safe. Night is ignorance. Sometimes we are tired, we want to stop, right? So that tiredness is like craving. So these are 2 things you have to deal with in the journeys. But you have to move on. And of course, it is much better, safer to travel with others who are going the same way. So this going the same way means you look up to the the Sangha of noble saints as a guide, in other words. So you're not alone in that sense. You have this vision, oh yes, people have traveled here before, this is the safe path, and you move on. And you have this vision, okay, this is where I'm heading, to this city called Nirvana, and so on, right? So the idea of the path is that it is always there, so to speak, and the Buddha discovers this path. So there's a beautiful sutta where the Buddha says there is this ancient path in the jungle, it's all overgrown and lost, and the Buddha comes along and clears up the path for us to follow again. So the Buddha doesn't invent things, he rediscovers this path to this ancient city called Nirvana. So there you are, you have this reflection on the Sakaya Sutta for today. Okay, let us proceed with a short reflection. Whenever we have a chance to reflect on the sutta, we have this opportunity to open a window, so to speak, to again look back into the Buddha's time, to listen to his teachings. With a peaceful mind, with our meditation, the Buddha's voice becomes clearer to the suttas. And we begin to see a clear pattern how we can practice this teaching so that we are at peace with ourselves. And when we are at peace with ourselves, it's easier for us to help others so that they too can feel their peace. Reflecting in this way is wonderful good karma, but the power of such good karma and many others that we are doing, our practice of generosity, keeping the precepts, learning the Buddha's teaching, meditating for peace of mind and wisdom. Well, all these good deeds we have done, may we attain, may we at least aspire to spiritual awakening, especially as a stream winner, at least in this life itself. In this moment of peace too, let us send out our loving kindness to all our loved ones, our friends and relatives, the people that we know. May they be well and happy. Let us send our loving kindness also to people who may be inimical to us, people whom the Dharma have not touched, that they too may see the Dharma and be transformed into happy people and be liberated